You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All right, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Oh, doing good, man. Doing good. So playoff hockey, which has been awesome this year so far. Playoff basketball, which, I'm not a basketball fan, whatever. But we've had college spring games, which have been quite entertaining to watch if you've been able to catch any of those. And, oh, by the way, we have this little thing called the NFL Draft coming up on Thursday. So lots of good stuff going on. Super excited. Can't wait to kick off the Thursday show and do the Draftapalooza or whatever the hell we're calling it this year. But I will wait 48 hours to have fun with that because right now I get to kick it with you guys. How are y'all doing?
I'm good, man. Talk about unpredictability. That's going to be kind of a theme this week. It's been an unpredictable playoffs for the NHL. Those games have been insane. Everybody's kind of I don't want to talk about it.
We're going to talk about it.
I stayed up way too late last night,
right?
And was very disappointed about the outcome of that one. And then today, Kale gets hit with a 1-game suspension for the hit. So it's going to be a rough game 5. Really, what the Avs need. All right, if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it. What the Avs need is one more skill guy. Losing Val Nichushkin to unknown reasons. Really, like he just left the team. Yeah, I've seen that report. I don't know how accurate that is, but losing him really hurts because you need another skill guy in your top 6 forwards, and they just don't have that right now. They have 5 skilled forwards in the top 6, and it's just been it's been a struggle because of that.
Hold on, I might disagree with one of these.
Oh, so the 5 are McKinnon, Rodriguez, Lehkonen, and then Mikko and JT. And they need that. They need a third.
Argue Rodriguez. He has been awful.
He hasn't been great.
Really bad series, man. He's turning the puck over. He's not aggressive. He can't get his shot off. Like he is not a threat. The Kraken do not view him as a threat whatsoever. Like it is so obvious. And this series has been frustrating because if it's not McKinnon, Cale Makar, or Rantanen, there is zero offensive production coming from this team. Like Taves will throw a shot in there every once in a while. Rodriguez, I think I need to go. This is probably exaggerated. I think he has 5 total shots in 4 games. Like I think that's it. 5 shots on goal in 4 games as a forward. Like it's just not good enough. And you can't just sit back in awe of Jarek McKinnon. Nate McKinnon. Yeah, exactly. Football show. Nate McKinnon's speed, right? Like you're not going to get those breakaway goals like you had in game 3 where he flips it to himself and just blazes past everyone at 23 miles an hour in 4 steps. Like 23 miles an hour he got there in 4 steps. That was crazy. But you're not going to get that every game.
I was texting one of my friends about the game, and I just said, how fortunate are we that all those years ago Nate McKinnon picked up a hockey stick? Like to watch that dude play, he is one of those guys that is like transcending the game, and we are so fortunate to be able to see him play. But yeah, it's been a dogfight with Seattle. That they are unreal. The first 10 minutes of a hockey game, Seattle is. They are unbelievable. Just how intense their forecheck is, how fast they're moving around, and the Avalanche need to figure out a way to sustain that pressure for the first 10 minutes of the game, and then because they do take over, as the game progresses on, Seattle can't keep up that forecheck. But
I miss Kadri. We should have re-signed him.
That's a huge hole. That's a very big hole that we are missing right there. Goaltending has been suspect at times. Georgiev has let in a few softies, but overall, I think he's made some critical
3 and 4.
Huh?
I thought he's much better in 3 and 4.
I would agree with that. I think the lights were a little bright for him. It was his first playoffs, it was his first time being the guy in the playoffs. And I think the stage got a little bright. Meanwhile, Grubauer's on his freaking revenge tour and playing lights out. Guy was a sieve when he played in Colorado in the playoffs. But there's been many other entertaining games. The Maple Leafs comeback, right before the Cavs game, that was insanity. I don't think anybody would have seen that. Like, nobody saw that coming. It was 10.5 minutes to go. It was 4-1 to Tampa Bay, and Toronto came back and won that game overtime. That's just insane. Anyways, I love this time of the year because we've got baseball going. We've got NBA playoffs. If you're into that sort of thing, I think the Nuggets are still alive.
They're playing tonight. If they win,
they're up 3-1,
advance.
right? Yeah. Okay. There we go. The NHL playoffs are obviously awesome. And then, as Kevin said, we are going to get to what I think is going to be one of the most unpredictable first rounds that we've seen in quite some time for the NFL draft.
Well, do you think back to last year, right? When it comes to the NFL draft, it was one of those that we were looking at it, we were going into it, and we're like, man, this is going to be a lunch pail type of draft, right? Like, this is one of those that you're not going to see the big, there wasn't really that skill set, deep skill position type of players in a lot of different positions there. A lot of guard, a lot of offensive line, defensive line, a lot of in the trench type of work is what we're anticipating. And then, middle of the round, started getting a bunch of trades going. This year, you got a lot of intrigue going on. Vegas doesn't even seem to know what they're doing at this point. I say that just simply from the standpoint, the odds have shifted drastically, with, hugely in favor of Bryce Young for the number 1 overall. And then today it backs off with, anonymous, posting, out there. And then, I sent you guys a text in our little group chat about Tyree Wilson and the odds having shifted to where he's now the favorite to be the first defensive player, drafted in this draft. So kind of just some overall craziness there. And we'll get into it when we start doing, I think what we're dubbing tonight is mock 3.0 or dueling mocks. I think that's the funnest way to say it is. We got dueling mocks going on as each one of us did our own mocks all the way, picks 1 through 31. And we'll go through those, some consistent picks all the way through and some ones where we all had different guys going different places. So kind of an interesting mix there as well. But yeah, what are the thoughts we got heading into Thursday night here?
Aaron Rodgers is officially a Jet.
Oh yeah! Holy crap! Forgot about that.
We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that. Depending on who you talk to, I feel like it's a good trade and a fair trade because you have a lot of people on each side saying this, the Jets won or the Packers won or anything like that. And typically, right, like, if you go back to a business sense, like when you're making a deal, if both sides are a little uncomfortable, that's probably right in the sweet spot of the deal, right? Everybody has a little bit of risk involved, and you go from there. And I think this does. The Jets' risk was giving up the capital, right? And not so much the swapping of the first round picks or the second round pick this year, but they really didn't want to give up a first rounder, right? Like we kept hearing that throughout. And ultimately, barring any sort of kind of fluke thing, the conditional second round pick next year becomes a first if Aaron Rodgers plays 65% of the offensive snaps or more. That's it's pretty well a foregone conclusion, like I said, barring injury or something crazy. So,
because he just does that. Like that's a very low mark for him to hit.
Right. So, it works. The Packers got the compensation they wanted. Second rounder this year. They moved back 2 spots. Whoop-de-doo. Like,
right.
No one, I don't think they care about that at all. And then, so they get the second rounder and then like a 4th round, 5th rounder, whatever it is this year. And then that conditional pick. I mean, not that they don't add up, but the big ones are the second rounder this year and most likely a first rounder next year for Aaron Rodgers. So good for them. Each team gets what they want. I don't know that necessarily changes a whole lot of thoughts on the draft board, but I did go back and make a couple tweaks after that, just rethinking the situation now that it's done and over with, and we'll get into that.
Well, and just kind of piggyback on that thought there, right? When you think about it, right? Even if it is a conditional first round pick, where the Jets are planning to be drafting at next year by making this move and making that, that kind of investment in this season and kind of going all in, so to speak, right? Most teams, when you look at it and the way that they view their draft board is, really picks 1 through 15, 1 through 20, depending upon the GM, everything like that, is really what they consider kind of the first round pick because of how they do their big boards and how they have that going and where they have their draft rankings on guys. Typically when you start getting into picks 20 through 32, in most cases, a lot of teams start viewing those as, you start viewing those more as almost second round type of deals. And you see guys that, they may have graded as a second round player that they go through and they pick that way. And that's why you see a lot more fluidity happen when it comes to some of the trading that goes on, right? Like it's not uncommon for a team to be sitting there at pick 23 or 24 and go, let's trade back here because our guy didn't fall. The board didn't fall the way that we want. We'll kick this one down the road anyway and go through it. And so if you're the Jets, you're going all in here. You're planning on picking, realistically, probably in that 25 or later type of deal there by making this move. And so, even on a second round that becomes a first round, in most GMs boards and most of the way these NFL teams do that, they still view that almost as a second round pick there. So, makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah, and realistically, the benefit of a first round is the fifth-year option, right?
Absolutely.
That's the benefit of getting a guy in the first round versus getting a guy in the second or later, is getting that fifth-year option. And so it's all about, what do you want in terms of control? Do you feel like it's going to be a guy that you're going to have for half a decade, or is it worthwhile to compile and get a bunch of guys that you might have for 4 years, and I think we've seen in today's NFL 2 years and you can really turn something around. So you don't need all 5 years to worry about a guy, especially at certain positions, right? At positions that are kind of, I don't want to say plug and play, but ones where you need multiple guys to be available to you. And that can make an impact, like on the D line, really anybody on defense, right? There are probably a few guys that are irreplaceable, but I think that's what these teams are really concerned about is, do we care about the fifth-year option, or do we care about getting, 1 or 2 more guys that we might have for 4 and then see where we go from there?
Right. You're absolutely right there, right? Like and you see it too, where a lot of teams, realistically, they'll draft the guy in the first round, they'll play him for the first 4 years, and then, do we pick up the fifth? Do we not pick up the fifth? Do we get a long-term? Yeah. And one of those that if they're putting the fifth on a player, it's more just so that they can get the long-term deal done.
Right. So they buy themselves some times to get the long-term deal.
Speaking of fifth-year options, nice segue there, boys.
Yep.
Joe Burrow, the Bengals exercised their fifth-year option on Joe Burrow, and the Vikings exercised the fifth-year option on Justin Jefferson.
Yep.
Dang, it's hard to believe that they are already in that.
Right.
I mean, shoot, Justin Jefferson lit the world on fire, and Joe Burrow has been to a Super Bowl already. So,
right.
Yeah. Again, quick turnarounds, right?
Very quick. And like I'm saying, 2 years. I mean, look at the Eagles, right? The Eagles were not very good, and when Sirianni took over, they were not very good. That was a team in turmoil. Doug Peterson gets the axe. They, bring in Jalen, replace Carson Wentz, and 2 years later, they have their 1 year of trials and tribulations. Next year, they're playing for a championship. So. Right. If you're looking to do a turnaround, there's a blueprint out there to do it in 2 years. You need a little bit of luck along the way, and you need some dudes to pan out that maybe weren't projected to be such. But I think that there's a blueprint out there. So realistically, a lot of these GMs are thinking if we can catch lightning in a bottle, which I think you kind of have to have that mentality as a GM, right? That eternal optimist. That if they can catch lightning in a bottle, they can make a run, and you can cement yourself forever in a place.
Well, and you think about Jacksonville, 2 years in a row, they picked first overall because, the record's that bad. They just aren't very good. Very quick turnaround time where they're a playoff team, and they very much look like they could control that division for years going forward right now. So,
and realistically, that's a second round playoff team if it weren't for one boneheaded play, right? Like, they're in the second round. I mean, and look, honestly, I say this, you just, especially in the NFL, it's kind of like, NCAA basketball, you just have to get in the tournament and get a chance because it's one game, and maybe the team you're going up against just doesn't have it that day. Maybe the guys that are on the other side just don't have it, because they're human and they just don't have it. And you squeak out a win, and then it, like, all bets are off at that point, right? Like you just don't know with these 1 game playoffs. And so that's where, just getting into the tournament just helps you.
Right. Absolutely. Before we get into our mock draft and the dueling mocks, we did have a couple of questions come in through the Twitters, through the various socials out there. So we're going to hit some of those up here real quick.
I guess before we get to these questions, there was some other stuff that came out too since we last spoke, right? Dealing with one of the players in one of these questions. When are these NFL players going to learn? Like, don't bet on football. Bet on literally anything else if you want to get your kicks. But
and that's the thing is, like,
don't bet on football.
You can't do it at any facility, anything like that. And that was also part of the problem, as it was reported there as well. So,
and the NFL's been super clear on it, right?
Right.
Like, we already saw a year suspension. So just don't do it. Like, remove yourself from that possibility, which is, I get it. It's difficult because the NFL is making gobs and gobs of money from all of these fantasy sites and betting, they have official betting partners and all this stuff. I get that, but, like, you're already doing okay. Like, you're in the NFL, you're guaranteed to make a couple $1,000s, even if you're not suiting up on Sundays. Like, you're making a couple grand a week. There's no need to find something else to invest that money in.
Listen, you already hit the biggest bet that you were going to hit, right? You bet on yourself to get there. You hit it. You're now playing your dream out in real time there. Absolutely. So
it is interesting though, because there is this, this one side, the business side of the NFL that says, yeah, we'll take your money in whatever form it comes from. If it's from a betting site, we don't care. And they are one of the major push for a lot of these legalized gambling in a lot of states. And then there's the other side where they're like, yeah, but you guys can't do it. Like, it's a very weird dichotomy there. But at the same time, like, just be smart. For the love of God, be smart. It's going to cost you. And we've seen it now. We have another example.
Right.
Absolutely. If you want to bet on football, don't play football.
Right.
Or if you want,
I guess, like, just don't bet on the NFL.
But if you're an NFL, don't do it in a team facility or anything like that. That's also a lesson learned there as well, it seems. So anyway, let's go ahead and get to one of these questions, and then we'll come back and hit that other question up that Alex was referencing there. But 12-team Superflex is the scenario there. Would you trade Josh Allen for the 101, 111, 112, and a 2024 first round pick? The other quarterbacks on the roster are Tannehill and Minshew, but this team is stacked at wide receiver with A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams, T. Higgins, and Cooper Kupp. So you could potentially trade one of them for a quarterback there as well. What route you taking?
I'm keeping Josh Allen, right? Like this. Here's the deal about this time of year. Everyone gets enamored with these rookie picks, right? Like, ooh, I get all these young players and it's dynasty and oh my gosh, I have to get younger and younger and younger. Here's the deal. You play dynasty in a 3 to 4 year window. That's it. That's all you're playing in dynasty is a 3 to 4 year window. There is a greater likelihood that with the 101, 111, 112 and a first next year, that 3 of those 4 picks are going to be a bust than you getting 3 adequate pieces that in combination make up for what you had at Josh Allen at quarterback. Like I am not doing this deal. I get it where it seems nice, where it looks sweet. I'm not doing it. Josh Allen is a top 3 fantasy quarterback and will continue to be a top 3 fantasy quarterback for the next 4 to 5 years guaranteed. That absolutely covers your fantasy window for dynasty and what you're looking to do. And there are not any players in this draft that are worth Josh Allen.
No.
Yeah, I think the reason why a lot of people, Kevin, to your point, that you get these, you're hearing so much about these rookies. And that's because that's what people are talking about. Like that's what we were forced to talk about. They're unknown commodities, so you have to talk about them because they're going to hopefully become unknown commodity, but they aren't. And so anytime where somebody is thinking, "Oh, I might get rid of Josh Allen for what sounds like a really good haul," but anytime that's happening, I will point you to 2 number 1 overall picks made in the last 2 decades that didn't pan out. Jamarcus Russell in 2007. Tim Couch in 1999, so just over 2 decades. And then go even more recent, Blake Bortles was number 3 overall to the Jaguars. Josh Rosen, number 10 overall. And what happened? He didn't even last a year in Arizona, right? So take some cautious optimism to these guys, but make sure you have a fallback, because if you're betting the house on something that's not that you don't know about, like you're gonna pay for it.
Right. There's a reason that you can accumulate a ton of rookie picks to get proven production out of it. Like there's a reason that you can do that, right? Because I'd much rather have the known than the unknown at that point, right? And I feel very confident in my ability to scout players and look at them and evaluate rookie picks and coming in and all of that, right? And I still would not take a Josh Allen for really 4 at bats to try and replace him, even with the 101. And you know what? Let's even say that the 2024 is also the 101. Okay, 101 next year, Caleb Williams, maybe. If I'm guaranteed that I can get Caleb Williams and I can do that, maybe. But I'm a huge believer in Caleb Williams. And even then, I'm still not looking at doing that, right? Because he hasn't proven it on the NFL level. Josh Allen has proven it on the NFL level for multiple seasons, and for fantasy for multiple seasons, being quarterback number 1 2 years in a row, and has been a consistent top 10 QB for Superflex. So no, not going to do it. If you're needing to do it, trade Devontae Adams. Right, go out there. You can get a really good quarterback for Devontae Adams there for your number 2 super flex. Devontae Adams is 30 years old already. Wide receivers tend to age out at about 30 to 31. You're right there riding that cliff. Get out from that one while you can still get out. Cooper Kupp coming off of a major injury at 29 years old, and this is one of those that guys tend not to bounce back that quickly once you get past about 25 on injuries like that. So I don't know that I would move either one of those 2 wide receivers, and you can certainly find your second super flex and be just fine. And you're set up better to contend for a championship that way.
Yeah. Cosign. Allen's your anchor. You cannot be successful in a super flex without at least 1 top 10 quarterback.
And one. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
And if you don't have one, you're just not going to come close, right? It really doesn't matter what else you have on the roster. You need one top 10 quarterback, and you can survive with just one quarterback, right? Like we've seen your ability to draft and maneuver your roster and everything else. Teams who had Jamal Williams last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jamal Williams, right, was suspected to be your fourth running back, and that ended up being your super flex because you only had one serviceable quarterback. His touchdown production alone
made you tough to compete with. Yeah.
Made you tough. Yeah. Made you competitive. Like even with Cooper Kupp going down, no, I think and I know Alex has his point to get, but I think we're all at least on the same page here. Like you're not making this deal right now.
And I would also, just to add a cautionary note, we don't know where any of these guys are going yet, right? So pump the brakes, let the draft dust settle, and then maybe you can look at some potential moves that you might want to make for these rookies. But again, we're talking about guys that are unproven at the NFL level, and who knows what situation they're going into, when they get picked. I go back to, some of these NFL draft busts. The reason they were busts is because they went to bad teams. It's not that they were bad players, but they went to bad teams. And the reason why you're a bad team and you're picking number one is because you're a bad team. So that's another thing. Just pump the brakes. There's no need to be, making these deals right now. Season doesn't start for another 4 months.
Right.
You've got time.
So here's the other thing to look at it too, right? Like you made a great point that they're bad, they're good players going to bad teams, and unless they fall into a situation that is, they can actually grow and develop, it's going to be tough sledding for them. But you think about it from the standpoint that Jalen Hurts, who I think any of us would be locked and loaded, ready to have him on our super flex, and take him in a startup super flex very early, right? He's got kind of checks all those boxes. He's a guy you could have gotten in the second round of every rookie draft when he came out, a third round rookie draft. And if it was a single QB, there was chances he went undrafted.
Because he was behind Carson Wentz, who had just come off of a near MVP caliber season and a Super Bowl. I mean, he was going to be behind Carson Wentz that whole time. So, yeah, landing spot is such a huge determining factor in what you're getting. Like, I know that the 101 sounds nice on paper, but right. Is that 101 a player for the Texans? That's going to be a while for them to get good. It's not going to 2 years if they're lucky. And I think they're a little bit further away than 2 years.
And it's one of those that even if you're locked and loaded, that Bijan is the generational talent that you're going to go out and get, and he's the guy that you need to complete your team. I tell you right now, if Bijan lands on a couple of these spots that I've seen a lot of people mock him to, and one of the things that I keep seeing people go crazy about is mocking Bijan to Philadelphia. If he goes to Philadelphia, he moves way down my draft board for Dynasty.
Barf.
That's one of those I don't want it. Maybe I start spending a late first, early second type of thing. And there's no chance he falls that far, obviously. But the situation on that, moves me completely off of it.
No, it's the equivalent of Rashard Bateman going to the Ravens,
yes.
right? A lot of people, really, I think most people in the fantasy football industry, anybody who talked about it, wrote about it, anything like that, were all very high on Bateman coming out. And as soon as he went to the Ravens, half of them were out, right? Us included.
We were all hard pass at that point.
Pass. I'm not going to do it. The situation, the talent cannot overcome that situation. Bijan could be the best running back prospect of all time. But if he goes into a situation where the coach has a hard-on for a running back by committee and is not going to let him kind of wear teams down and get his touches to be successful late in the game, it caps that potential, right? And you go from a guy who's drafted in the right situation, and we're all thinking he has top 5 potential for fantasy as a rookie in the right situation. Well, now you drop him 10 spots, and now he's an RB2. I mean, I think 15 might be the floor, but I think 15's the floor with Philadelphia, like because of how they run that offense. They're just not going to let them touch the ball 20 to 25 times a game.
Right. Same thing too, right? You think it was a few years back, the Jonathan Taylor was the couldn't miss prospect coming out, was bound and determined to be the 101 draft. The NFL draft comes and goes, and Jonathan Taylor moves down most draft boards because he's going into a running back by committee, what looks like behind Marlon Mack. Obviously that was before we knew the injury, all of that stuff. And CEH was a guy that, most people pegged as a late first, somewhere in the second at best going into the pre-draft process. In many cases, shot all the way up to the 101. And, looking back on that, which one would you rather have, right? Like there's a lot of those things that even if the running back goes to a good spot, like we all thought CEH was in a great spot going to Kansas City, doesn't mean that it pans out for fantasy and doesn't pan out for the production around that. So all of that to circle back around and say, take the proven commodity. Don't chase the draft picks there. Don't get rookie fever. So the other question that we had surrounds Lamar Jackson and surrounds Jamison Williams and surrounds the 103 and also surrounds Treylon Burks. So the question was Lamar Jackson or the 103 and Jamison Williams. It's a super flex. The other offer could be the 103 and Treylon Burks for Lamar Jackson. Do you have a side that you want?
So my thoughts and opinions on this are I would rather have the 103 and probably Williams. I understand, but the suspension issue. So, if you're dead set on Burks, I guess, but I think they're going to have quarterback turmoil in Tennessee here for the next, 2-3 years. So I think I'd avoid that. But I'd rather have the 103, and here's why. In a super flex situation, that means at 103, you are guaranteed B.J. Robinson, Bryce Young, or Anthony Richardson.
Or even C.J. Stroud, depending upon
how he doesn't have the ceiling, right? And I think that's why I'm leaving him out. He doesn't have the ceiling. Bijan, you're going after running back, possibly, right? Because quarterback goes heavy in super flex. We all know this. So Bijan's in play at 103. So if that's where it falls, okay, you have arguably a generational talent, depending on where he goes, right? Still need to figure that out on Thursday, but depending on where he goes, you have a generational talent running back, or you can get one of the top, what I would consider one of the top two natural prospects in this draft. It's not how they're going to be drafted, but how they look as a professional prospect. And Anthony Richardson is Lamar Jackson, but better. And he is bigger framed. They have the same throwing skill set, right? So neither one of them throw the ball extremely well. We've seen Lamar Jackson's ceiling, the MVP year. He has gotten worse every year since then. Like, he is not coming back, guys. He's not. He is a guy who can use his legs, but has made a lot of business decisions here in the last couple of years. And I don't think that changes once he gets paid. Like, when all this dust settles, franchise tagger, long-term contract, I don't care. I don't think Lamar Jackson goes back to a situation where he is nearly as productive as he was for his MVP season. So the closest thing to Lamar Jackson in this year's draft, Anthony Richardson, actually plays a lot more like Cam, but he's faster. Mm-hmm. So that's where I would rather gamble, right? I have the pick in hand. I don't love Lamar Jackson, right? And that's part of my deal. I don't love the fact that he struggles to throw outside the numbers. I don't love the fact that he doesn't have true top-end wide receivers. And the one, true number two, maybe bottom-end number one in Hollywood, they traded away. Like, it's him and Mark Andrews. Rashard Bateman was hurt his rookie year, and he wasn't very good last year. You think Monken's offense is going to help out a little bit, but he still has to have people to throw the ball to. It's a run-first offense. Lamar doesn't want to run anymore. All this is screaming down. Sell, sell, sell. Okay, fine. So I want the side with the pick and one of the young receivers, dealer's choice.
Yeah. Cosign. I 100% on board with that as well, right? Like, you can get yourself a quarterback you can get yourself a quarterback to it. You keep the young wide receiver prospects there. If one of them pans out, great, and one of them turns into fantasy gold, even better. But I've got to agree with you. I'm selling Lamar if I've got him, and I have been moving out of the Lamar moving out of Lamar camp all this offseason as well. So, Alex, any further thoughts on that one?
No, you guys have nailed it.
Awesome. Well, any other thoughts before we start getting into some dueling mocks?
Yes, breaking news as we're recording this. The Denver Nuggets are through to the second round of the NBA playoffs with a 112-109 win.
That's okay. I don't know. I'm a Nuggets fan.
But there you go. Nuggets are through.
All right.
I like
let's
do football.
Okay, let's go back to football. All righty. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get into mock 3.0, or as I like to call it, dueling mocks here. And so I'll shift some things around here. All right. We're going to get to the number one pick here. Trades were allowed. Obviously, you're trading with yourself type of thing. You had to make the compensation work, all that kind of stuff. If you chose to do that, just setting the stage here for that, for everybody out there. If you, we'll throw it out there as well. If you like a pick more than the other, throw it in the comments. Let's hear you guys shout it out. Let's have some fun with this thing. Let's play along with it. Starting off, number one, the Carolina Panthers are on the clock here. And Alex and Kevin both going with CJ Stroud. I'm going to be the
pivoted pre-show.
The graphic was already made.
The graphic was already made. But for the record, I pivoted pre-show.
Fair enough. And he did pivot to Bryce Young there as well. So Kevin and I are now on the Bryce Young.
So I'm the contrarian.
Yes.
Look, I don't know. I got it in my head that the Panthers are going CJ Stroud, and I'm just going to stick with it. I am wholly expecting to be wrong when the draft begins. But I expect to go 0 for 1 right off the bat here. And realistically, if I get 5 picks right this year, I'll be ecstatic because I have no idea what's going to happen.
And that's okay. Like from everything that you would read and everything that would make sense, is you would think that CJ Stroud would be a better fit for what Frank Reich looks for in a quarterback. He's never really coached somebody under 6'2". Bryce Young, on a good day is 5'10". So CJ Stroud with the accuracy, with the all of that, like puts together the tape, checks all the boxes. If I was a GM making the number one overall pick, I'm making CJ Stroud, but I'm going with what I think the Panthers are going to actually do, and I'm taking Bryce Young for him in that case.
But you bring up some good points. Carson Wentz was a safe player coming out of college.
Mm-hmm.
CJ Stroud's a safe player in terms of decision making and everything. Size comparable to Carson, and that's the last player that Frank Reich really got to work around. That was a pick, right? Was Carson. So
although
there's
Will Levis is probably a closer competent physical skill set of what
probably fair.
What Carson did. Maybe that's maybe that was
that's
somebody
where the Reddit post came from.
Exactly.
I don't know that I recall a player going through a bigger 7-day spiral than what CJ Stroud has had the last 7 days.
It's been remarkable.
Right. The Wonderlic scores, or whatever the hell they're calling it these days, and saying that he absolutely tanked that and can't comprehend information and make decisions fast enough. You have rumors coming out that he was difficult to coach, like did all these things with, top end receivers his entire college career, never had to kind of figure it out on his own. But then you have the game tape, and the game tape is outside of one really bad game against Michigan 2 years ago, he was really good, right?
Yeah.
Like I am not an Ohio State fan by any stretch of the imagination, but I I had never seen a quarterback do what he did against Georgia in the quarterfinals of this past season's college football playoffs.
Well, there's
semifinals, sorry. But it was just it didn't matter what kind of pressure they had on him. Like, he was so calm, cool, and collected and found the right guy. And, that game, that 42-41 game is arguably the best game in the last 2 decades,
right.
At least.
And there's a chance if Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't go down, that's a game that swings the other way. Like, they were
not Buttercup.
but it's funny that you bring the knock on him about the wide receivers, right? Like, that's one of those that is very much in play there. But you think about it, this year he got that job done without two of the wide receivers that went in the first round last year. One of those guys was the offensive rookie of the year this year in Garrett Wilson. Chris Olave was highly in contention for offensive rookie of the year, and Jackson Smith-Njigba outperformed both of them when all three of them were on the field together in this offense. And JSN was out most of the season as well. So, like, you want to try and give the knock on this guy that, he got it done because of his receivers, this, that, and the other. I'm not buying that knock. This is a guy that can flat out play.
So
I agree. That's why he's going number 1 overall.
Right.
I'm right there with Derek, though, right? Like,
if I'm like I said,
there's enough smoke, there's fire here. So that's why I finally, jumped to Bryce Young based off the information. But I'm with Derek. If I'm the GM, the Carolina Panthers, and I am, traded up to get the number 1 overall pick, I'm taking CJ Stroud. Like, that is who I'm taking with that pick. I want someone who, I can coach to scramble a little bit more and use his legs, but someone who is more of a prototypical quarterback and not right, wrong, or indifferent, a guy who has Russell Wilson-esque comps, because Russell Wilson hitting in the 3rd round to overtake Matt Flynn was not in the Seahawks plan. Russell just didn't say no. No one had him doing the things that he's done for the last 10 seasons.
Right. There's a reason that you don't see the Drew Breeses come around all the time, right? Like, the reason you typically see the prototypical size on that one. But all right, moving on to number 2. That brings the Houston Texans to the clock. And this one here is another pick that has had a bunch of smoke going every which way. And who knows if it's really the lying season that's happening here, or if there's actually some fire to some of the smoke. But we're going to go to number 2 right here. And it flip-flops here. Alex takes Bryce Young for the Texans. I've got CJ Stroud there. Kevin had Bryce Young, but I'm assuming that you're flipping that to the CJ Stroud here. Okay. So flip-flop there. That it's interesting listening to some of the smoke here, right? Like, there's a lot of things that have been, reports circulated around that CJ Stroud is not the Texans pick, and that's not where they would want to go here. Potentially trying to move out of that. But that was for our mock purposes. If you're the Texans, how do you not take a guy that's sitting there like that, right? You've got 2 elite quarterbacks, in my opinion, in this draft class here. So you can't go into the season with Davis Mills. We already saw what that experiment looked like last year. That didn't pan out there. And Case Keenum, right? Like, Case Keenum is not a starting NFL quarterback. We've seen that one play out multiple times, barring one good year in Minnesota. So I think that CJ Stroud's here, but there's a lot of scenarios that I could see them trying to trade out this pick, but I don't see them trading to Indianapolis or Tennessee, the 2 most quarterback hungry teams in this draft class, besides the Houston Texans. And I also don't see them trading to an in-division rival like this one. So
cosign. You got to get that quarterback, right? You got to get it, and you're not going to be able to get it with what you're wanting later in the draft with your 2nd pick. So get your guy now and start developing, right? You need to start this new chapter. You have a new head coach, kind of a new regime. Let's bring in the new quarterback, and let's start working with some of these young receivers and developing some offense here. They did a decent amount with the defense last year. And I think they can still do some more this year. But this pick right here at 2 overall, this is not a pass rusher pick for the Texans. This needs to be a quarterback pick.
Yeah, they need to fill that. This is the biggest glaring need that the Texans have. And we know that in this league, if you don't have a quarterback, you're not going to have success. So even on teams where it's other guys that can carry you, you still need to have that quarterback. You still need to have the threat, for defenses to keep them honest. So, I think they go quarterback here. If they have a dance partner, who would it be? Las Vegas? Like that's your maybe dance partner for a trade. And honestly, I think Vegas would have to give up too much, and they would find somebody else who's just in front of them to get what they want. Because after you get past these two, you still have a pretty good dynamic talent at quarterback still hanging out there that you can probably go get if you want. Actually,
Kevin and I were talking about this one before the show. Detroit could be an interesting one there, where they get their CJ Stroud has been given a comp of a Jared Goff. They're very seemingly happy with that, but CJ Stroud much younger with a much cheaper price tag on that one that they could continue building around there. And they've got the draft capital to go and make a move like this, but I don't see them necessarily moving up to make it happen. Any other thoughts on number 2? Moving on to number 3, the Cardinals on the clock here. And the Cardinals are one that I think they're really hoping. I think they are desperately hoping that Houston just, does something different than take a quarterback there. And they leave some of those quarterbacks here and they try and trade out of this pick. I think they try and trade out of it anyway, but I don't think that they could find a dance partner for what was there. So I've got them taking Will Anderson. Both of you had them taking Tyree Wilson.
Yeah, I think the Cardinals have a ton of holes, right? And like you mentioned, Derek, they'd love for someone to, kind of step up and take this pick off their hands, where they could drop back a few spots in the first round, acquire, a second this year, maybe a second next year, something like that, to continue to bolster a roster that has a lot of holes in it here at the moment. But I think teams like Carolina proved us wrong. But I think for the most part, these top 3 picks, it takes so much to go get it, right? And you have to feel like you're truly just kind of one piece away from turning that corner, right? Whether it was a bad year because of injury the year before, or whether you feel like you're just one piece to be in the playoffs and kind of solidify, or maybe not solidify, but calm down your fan base or extend your job for another reason in certain cases. But I just don't see that happening. I think Carolina is going to have to swallow this. And this, right? We talked about how pass rusher wasn't the pick for Houston. Pass rusher is absolutely the pick for Carolina. I'm not going to be shocked if it's either one of these guys. I really am not, and I'm not going to be disappointed if it's Will Anderson and not Tyree Wilson. The only thing is, shucks, I wish I were right, but either one of these guys instantly improves the Arizona Cardinals defense and at least gives them a true threat to the quarterback to try and, shorten the length of time the defense is on the field for them.
Yeah, I think you get Jonathan Gannon in there, defensive-minded coach. I think he wants a defensive guy that he can really start to build around.
Right.
Although I will say, I do think Arizona does trade this. I'm not sure that I think Arizona will wait until the very last minute, very last second to make this pick, because I do think that they will try to find a dance partner.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right, moving on to number 4. That brings the Colts onto the clock here. And both of you guys going with Anthony Richardson. I went with Will Levis right here.
Richardson's the cheat code, right? He's big-bodied, 6'4", mobile, has a big arm, needs to work on some accuracy. Obviously, that's kind of his big knock coming out of Florida. But as far as ceilings in this quarterback class go, Anthony Richardson's ceiling is by far the highest out of any quarterback in this class. He is also kind of changes the mold that the Colts have been in here for the last few seasons with, maybe some quarterbacks that are not as fleet of foot, if you will.
Statues.
Yeah. So now Levis can move as well, right? So it's not that Will Levis is in that mold, but this is that polar opposite move, right? Like it is going, okay, let's see what this looks like. We have Jonathan Taylor. Like we have an offensive line that's starting to age a little bit, but is still pretty stinking serviceable. Let's try and do some different things with the run game and really capitalize on our star running back and a young budding wide receiver who can run and take a page out of the Baltimore Ravens playbook from 2018.
Right. I went with the, Will Levis. It's one of those. Shane Steichen has a track record with both types of quarterbacks, right? Like he got Justin Herbert rookie year. They set the world on fire. Justin Herbert set the rookie record for touchdowns thrown in a rookie season. And then he had Jalen Hurts last year, which, they went to a Super Bowl. They're in that dual threat type of deal. The problem is that Indianapolis needs a quarterback that's a little bit more, NFL ready right now. Anthony Richardson needs some improvement on the accuracy side of that, and that's really where it came down to. It was, do you have a guy that, Anthony Richardson maybe need a little bit more of development there, may rely a little bit too much on his legs, things like that, to make things happen and make plays early on that, or do you get a guy that can make the throws with accuracy right now? That was kind of the deciding factor for me, was Will Levis and his better accuracy rate at this point. So.
I will say this. I firmly believe Anthony Richardson goes number 4. I'm not 100% that it's Indianapolis that is the one making the pick here. I could see that team from Las Vegas sneaking up here, because that head coach has a propensity for athletic quarterbacks from the University of Florida. So
John Elway isn't playing GM though.
That's what he wasn't playing GM.
That's true.
When McDaniels was there.
No,
that's why we got John Elway back, was because McDaniels was there.
I think the Colts are going to ask us.
So I could very easily see. I think Anthony Richardson goes 4. I just don't know if it's to Indianapolis or to Las Vegas.
Well, yeah, that's true. It could be interesting because Tennessee could try and make a move up as well and try and make something happen here. But I like it. Any other thoughts here at 4? All righty, moving on to number 5. Number 5, Seattle's on the clock here, and it's just a flip-flop of pick number 3. Both you guys have Will Anderson. I've got Tyree Wilson going here, and it seems very much that Seattle's taking an edge rusher, and whoever's available between Wilson and Anderson here. Any other thoughts?
No, I think Seattle's happy to have either one of these guys and kind of bolster that defense and try and get back to a defensive prowess that led them to be so stinking successful.
Right.
Yeah, the division that they're in, they need defense. So they're in a very, very offensively potent division that they need to figure out ways to slow down offenses. So I think defense is the call here.
Right. All right, moving on to pick number 6, and all 3 of us saying Jalen Carter's heading to Detroit here. Any thoughts on this one?
Hard-nosed, locker room leader, kneecap biter. I mean, this just screams Detroit Lions, right? And obviously we all have him here. So I think he will fit in very well. It will help plug up the middle and make running against the Lions a little bit more difficult, because last year they gave it up on the ground.
Right. And I just saw some reports coming through earlier this week where the GM out there in Detroit, they met with Carter. He felt better about, the situation after meeting with him. So I think that very well could be the move here, and certainly one that, they got a couple of real gems last year in the draft along that defensive line there with James Houston, with Aiden Hutchinson getting after the pass. You get Jalen Carter to plug up the middle, and now you've with the additions they've already made this offseason on that defensive backfield, Detroit could be scary.
What a dirty young defensive line with Aiden Hutchinson and Jalen Carter like that. That's something to build a team around, right? Like that is a cornerstone right there. Like we are just gonna out body you on the line of scrimmage.
And think of the division that they're in and what they need to stop the most, right? You win your division, you get into the playoffs. So, what you need to stop the most is the run game for Minnesota, right? Dalvin Cook. You need to make sure that Kirk Cousins doesn't have time to locate Justin Jefferson. Chicago's you pretty much stop them with a 2x4. And then, you've got Jordan Love now as your problem in Green Bay, which I don't know is all that much of a problem, but he can be if he's got enough time. So realistically, like
sneaky fantasy sleeper right there.
I agree. Mm-hmm. But you're going to have to, that's what you need to do to counteract the teams that you see the most. And so it just makes sense that you go and get a big body to plug up the middle when you already have the weapons on the outside there.
And just imagine that 2 years in a row that that's kind of crazy to think about, that Detroit could realistically 2 years in a row get arguably the best defensive player in the draft in back-to-back years and not be drafted number one in either one of those, right? There was a lot of discussion on whether or not Aiden Hutchinson should have been number one overall last year or not. Trayvon Walker was. Detroit, I don't think could run. They couldn't get up to the podium fast enough to make that Hutchinson pick. And then Jalen Carter falling to him here. I think they are elated. All righty, moving on to number 7 here, the Raiders. And we've all got the Raiders taking cornerback here. Alex and I thinking it's Devin Witherspoon. Kevin's got Christian Gonzalez here, and makes sense, right? The AFC West, you've got to play against, you got to go up against Patrick Mahomes. You got to go up against Justin Herbert, and who knows if Russell Wilson can find himself again. But regardless of that, you've got two very high-powered offenses and quarterbacks that you need to try and stop, and cornerback makes a lot of sense here. Any thoughts?
I don't like my pick here because it's Josh McDaniels trying to get into that dude's brain. Yeah. So again, I mean, this is what I think they should do. I don't think they actually do this.
I think they absolutely go with like Devin Witherspoon or Christian Gonzalez here. I think quarterback is their play.
Yeah. I mean, they'd love for one of those top 3 guys to fall naturally. And if they do, I think that's where you see the pivot. Mm-hmm. I just, again, giving up so stinking much to get up inside the top 3, the way we have it, arguably the top 5, depending on how, the draft shakes out. But it's just, it's a ton. Like right now, you can sit back and go, okay, I have the best defensive back, right? Or on my big board, I have the top defensive back on my big board if you're the Raiders. Again, in a division that airs it out, right? Between the Chargers and the Chiefs, and you would assume what the Broncos can do to some extent with Sean Payton's offense. You need to be able to shut down wide receivers. Both these wide receivers are kind of a ball hawking press type cornerback, which will help out Las Vegas immensely.
Agreed. All righty, heading to number 8, the Falcons, and we just flip-flopped here, right? Kevin took Christian Gonzalez to pick before. Alex and I took Devin Witherspoon. It flip-flops here. We take Christian Gonzalez, and Kevin pulls the Devin Witherspoon. And so cornerback to the Falcons is the way we've got this one rolling. Any thoughts additional on this one?
The Falcons have done a ton to try and bolster this defense in the offseason, and I think this pick is just kind of their icing on the cake. Again, same type of thing. You get your young, developing cornerback who's able to start day one in a division that may not be as dangerous, I think is the word that I want to use, through the air. But nevertheless, he's able to grow and learn and develop. And either one of these guys, I think, will fit in nicely in Atlanta there and start day one for the Falcons.
Right, and they'd get a start as the second cornerback on that team, right, opposite AJ Terrell, who's turned out to be a pretty darn good player for the Falcons as a cornerback there. So now you're really kind of shutting it down with some young corners and allowing the the defense to take a breath there a little bit at times.
I hesitated to go quarterback here with the Falcons, but I think they're going to try to see what Ritter's got, and if they I think they're just going to just play it out and see what happens.
I think the Falcons are happier with Desmond Ridder than everybody else in the universe is.
Probably, yeah.
Like, I don't know if it's what he was doing in the offseason or how he was handling his business or whatever that is, but it sure seems like the Falcons are much happier with him in what they've seen as far as growth and development coming into year two than anybody else in the world from the outside looking in. So, we'll see how it shakes out, right? They got to do something.
This is another landing spot. I keep seeing a lot of people mock Bijan Robinson to number 8 to the Falcons, in which case, again, that moves him down my board again there, right? And I don't think they necessarily need him there. Tyler Algier had an outstanding rookie season for them, and you got a running back on the cheap. I don't know why you would want to go out there and pay a running back top 10 draft capital money. Now I get that he's a generational type of talent, yada, 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 but no team is no team in this draft that I can see anyway is a running back away from a Super Bowl.
No, it would make more sense for someone who wanted to argue wide receiver to go to Atlanta, in my opinion,
right?
And really get a kind of a three-headed monster for your passing attack between London and said rookie wide receiver and Kyle Pitts for Desmond Ridder. That would make more sense to me. I would be absolutely floored if Bijan went to the Falcons, and get your dump button ready on draft night, because if it happens, I'm going to have some choice words about
it. Fair enough. So tune in on Thursday.
So one interesting one, and none of us have it here, but one interesting one that I've seen in a lot of different mock drafts is Nolan Smith, the Georgia linebacker.
Yep. Makes sense. Hometown kid. Like, teams tend to like that because the fan base has already bought in on that.
Don't though. Like the Falcons do not draft Georgia players for whatever reason. Like, good, bad, indifferent. The Falcons, for whatever reason, have an affinity to snub Bulldogs. It's probably because their win percentage is better in that stadium than the Falcons is.
That could be. Very well could be. All right, moving on to number 9 here. The Bears. And Alex has got Broderick Jones going here. Kevin and I both saying Paris Johnson goes here. For me, this one, like Broderick Jones, probably better ceiling on the talent side of it. But I think the Bears need something a little bit more plug and play here. And Paris Johnson kind of fits that outside tackle spot a little bit more so in a plug and play type of position, ready day one type of thing. Any other thoughts here?
No, I completely co-sign. That is exactly my thought with this pick.
They're going O-line. They have to do something to protect Justin Fields. I went Jones, which worked out nicely for later in the draft for a team that I absolutely despise to pick up Paris Johnson.
There you go. The only way that I see them not going O-line here is if Jalen Carter falls here. Jalen Carter falls here. I think that's where they go. But other than that, I think that they are going offensive line, and they're gonna take the first offensive lineman off the board. Any other thoughts on 9? Number 10 it is, and Alex breaks the Bijan seal here with number 10 to the Eagles. Kevin and I both thinking Nolan Smith is the guy here, and I think it makes a lot of sense for them to keep going after that defensive line there. They lost a fair bit on the defensive line this last offseason. Bring in some youth, bring in a rusher, especially as much as they like to play kind of musical chairs along that defensive line there and really sub guys out.
So this is really funny because I also have the Eagles taking Nolan Smith.
There's
but
no
not here.
chance in hell he lasts that long.
Yeah. I've seen too many. There's too much out there for Bijan here, so I went with it, and I don't know if it's the right call, but that's what I went with.
It's a luxury pick, right? You're coming
Right.
off an NFC championship, and obviously participating in the Super Bowl. It is a luxury pick. Miles Sanders moved on to Carolina. I understand the hole there, but Philadelphia lost so much on the defensive side of the ball. I just couldn't wrap my head around why they wouldn't go defense, on top of the fact of how much they raved about the Georgia players coming in last season and their concepts and just understanding of professional football, even though they hadn't played it down yet. I think they go back to the well again. And I know we've talked about this, but that's just how I see it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think too, the fact that they've, again, like I just said, no team's a running back away from winning the Super Bowl there, right? Like, just not even a team that just got done losing one, right? Like, Bijan doesn't I don't think really doesn't make the difference in that one on whether or not they're Super Bowl champions or not there. But a guy on the defensive side of the ball that could get after Patrick Mahomes and potentially try and wreak some havoc on that one could. So I think, again, defensive line, probably a bigger, especially with Nolan Smith falling here. I think that's the move. I've seen Nolan Smith and a lot of other mocks end up down there in the late 20s, even into the second round on a couple of them. And I'm like, I don't know what y'all are thinking, but
weird. Like, he could be around still at 30.
He's not going to be around at 30.
So I don't believe so either.
There are a few things that I am dead certain on in this draft, and that is one of them.
So it'll be interesting come Thursday if he falls a little bit there and see the reaction there. But
I don't think he gets past Washington.
No, I don't.
That's kind of where I see his floor. Like, I don't see Ron Rivera passing on this, knowing that Chase Young's coming off an ACL injury. The offense or the defensive line's kind of sputtered. They need some new life in there, get some championship pedigree, take some pressure off of Chase Young. Like, I do think Washington's the floor of where Nolan Smith would go.
If he's still there at 13, I don't think he gets by Green Bay now either, right? Like, they're another team that seems to like those Georgia players kind of plug and play along that.
Quay Walker's punching people and doing.
Well, all righty, moving on to number 11. So number 11, Alex has Will Levis going to the Tennessee Titans to play heir apparent to Ryan Tannehill. I've got them going offensive line, and so does Kevin. I've got them taking Peter Skoronski, and Kevin's got them taking Broderick Jones. Peter Skoronski was one of those that I picked him up there to do a plug and play because they've got needs all along that offensive line, and Peter Skoronski is one of the few guys that can play offensive tackle on a pinch, can play guard, can play center, moved all along that line at Northwestern and did a fantastic job of it. So for a team needing to fill a lot of holes along that offensive line, that was why I went Peter Skoronski here.
No, that's a large part of why I went Broderick Jones. More of a natural tackle, but did play a little bit of guard in college. My one thing about Peter Skoronski is he can play tackle, but he's got like T-Rex arms for an offensive lineman. Like his reach is something only like 36 and a half inches. Like, it is ridiculously short. So sticking him out on tackle, you're bound to have some issues, I think, just because he's not going to be able to get his hands on a lot of these pass rushers playing T-Rex there on the outside. Either one, to me, makes sense. I'm okay. Like, I'm not going to freak out about the Will Levis thing, but the Titans have so many holes that they need to start figuring out. Like, yes, quarterback is absolutely one of them, and it is extremely important. But when Tennessee was at its best was when its offensive line was dominant, and they have lost so many pieces from that offensive line. They got to start building it back to try and salvage whatever they can get left out of Derrick Henry's career.
Bingo. Any other thoughts on 11?
So the reason I went Levis here, I really think it's dream scenario for Tennessee that they don't have to move and they still can get a quarterback. That's the way my draft shook out, that Levis was still available here. So I think if Levis is there, I think you're right. They should go O-line, but if Levis is still there, I think they can't afford to not take him And again, it all comes down to fifth-year option.
Fair enough. All righty, moving on to pick 12 here, and it's JSN across the board. Kevin and I are partnering JSN back with his college buddy here in CJ Stroud. Alex, I think you're just taking best available wide receiver and pairing him with the Bryce Young quarterback there.
That is correct. Just best available receiver. I think you got to get a toy for your other toy.
There you go. Any other thoughts on 12?
No, I like the pairing with JSN and Nico Collins, right? Like I think that provides they have different strengths, so I think that helps in a lot of different areas. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go defense, but a lot of it's going to have to be how the board kind of falls to them. I don't think that they're going to want to settle and just take defense for the sake of taking it. So in this situation, we all agree it's a new weapon for your new quarterback and your new regime. Let's hit the field running and raise as much hell as possible.
Bingo. All righty, looking at number 13, a mixed bag. Each one of us having a different call here. Alex taking Peter Skoronski. I'm taking Miles Murphy, and Kevin taking Lucas Van Ness. So Kevin and I both looking at the defensive line on a pass rusher. Alex looking at an offensive line on the pass protector there.
Yeah, I think you try to set yourself up with success for Jordan Love. So give him a little bit more time. You take an O lineman here. Like, you don't want him to fail, right? The last thing Brian Gutekunst, or however the hell you say his name, he doesn't want to come away from this Aaron Rodgers deal with egg on his face. And so you want Jordan Love to be as successful as possible. And the way you do that is give him as much time as you can. So I went O-line here, and Skoronski was the guy.
I took edge rusher, and I could have gone Lucas Van Ness as well. I think both of those guys could go right here. Another very strong candidate for me was Michael Mayer in this pick, right? Green Bay addressing tight end. Michael Mayer has the offense, or can be the inline blocker as well as get out and catch passes as well. But Green Bay just they like to go after defensive players first round, and I think that's where they stick.
And I think they did that because they knew that they had 12 that could, make an omelet out of anything. That was a horrific analogy. But he can make magic. And so you tried to fix the defense because you knew that 12 was going to be there. And I think that mindset shifts after you get rid of him.
So, yeah, it's trenches, right? And I think we all have the same kind of mindset. Alex, you're on one side of the ball, Derek and I are on the other, but it is you're building back within the trenches, right? You're kind of not necessarily starting from square one, but you are getting back to basics, or staying with basics, as Green Bay typically does. And, you win those battles up front, and whether it's getting to the quarterback or giving your quarterback time, I think either side makes sense. Green Bay does need both. But I kind of went with, the Midwest corn-fed Lucas Van Ness, and, we're going to see how it shakes out.
I like it. Moving on to 14, New England's on the clock. Alex taking Paris Johnson there. I went with Lucas Van Ness here, and Kevin taking Darnell Wright. So you guys go on offensive line. I took the pass rusher there. Again, very New England type of move here, building in the trenches. Either way, I could see them going. So I think they could go with any of these three here if the board falls for them.
Yeah, the reason I like Darnell Wright here is Bill Belichick seems to have an affinity for SEC offensive tackles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so this was me having him go back to the well. Now, I already had Paris Johnson off the board, but as opposed to going in a different position or even something crazy like them taking a wide receiver in the first round, which they're terrible at drafting wide receiver, going back to, all right, we're not quite sure about this quarterback, so let's make sure we give him some more time. Let's see if this last year of development is worth it before we decide a fifth-year option, and if this is the future with Mac Jones, or if we need to go back to the well.
Well, and realistically, so you have either Mac Jones or you have probably young replacement, which is going to need time, right? So that's why I went O-line here. They need the help on the line. You want to bolster that. Look at what – I mean, I don't want to use this as a comparison, but look at what Dallas did with Dak, right? They had that great offensive line, a really good running game, and Dak looked – Dak was able to take them to the playoffs because they had the best line in the league. So build from there, and that's what I think, Bill does is build from the O-line, and it doesn't matter who you have back there because you'll be able to hide a lot of flaws.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Through 14 picks, this is the one I'm least confident in, right? And part of it's because it's New England, and God only knows what Belichick's thinking. But we know he likes smart, adaptable, versatile players, right? Like, we know that those are three things that he really likes. So part of this that we're missing, obviously, is the interview process, how that went, what they thought of these players, and that component, if you will. But this is why it's a mock, right?
All right.
Do we know if Belichick's dog will be around while he's making the selections? Do we know? Have we gotten word?
I'm more or less thinking, are we going to have
who was that was naked in the
it was Tennessee. It was his kid
Vrabel.
It was Vrabel's kid in the bathroom taking a dump.
Oh man, the COVID draft was something
COVID.
else. That was insane.
That was
All right.
Kingsbury and that
old Roger sitting on his chair making picks like he's reading you a nighttime story. All right, sorry.
All righty. Moving on to pick 15. We've got the Jets having made the trade with Green Bay. And we've got a lot of offensive line going right here. We seem to think that Aaron Rodgers might need some protection out there in New York. Alex going Darnell Wright. I'm going with Broderick Jones. Kevin going Peter Skoronski here. I think our mindset's kind of all in the same spot, and it's just kind of how the board has fallen to us at this point.
Co-sign. Yep.
All right, moving right on to pick 16 then. We got the Washington Commanders here, and Alex going Deontay Banks. I'm going Joey Porter Jr. and Kevin going Miles Murphy. So I'm taking Joey Porter and the cornerback there. It could have gone between him or Deontay Banks for me. I think they're both kind of in about that same tier for me. But Joey Porter Jr., he just stands out a little bit more so to me on the film. So that was kind of the reason I went that way.
Yeah, and much like what I was talking about with Washington earlier in their defensive line and needing a pass rusher and everything else, insert Miles Murphy. So defense, though, right? Ron Rivera, we're all under that same idea.
Right. The pick 17. So both you and Alex are taking Joey Porter Jr. to the Steelers. I'm taking Darnell Wright. Joey Porter Jr. was not on my board here because he just went to pick earlier, but I'm going offensive line here. The Steelers have not had a very good offensive line the last few years here, so they get the versatile Darnell Wright to come in and kind of bolster that offensive line a little bit, allow them to try and establish a run game with Najee a little bit there, and give their first-round quarterback last year, Kenny Pickett, a little bit more time.
I just like the story of Joey Porter Jr.
Nostalgia, right?
I'm rooting for the story here.
Yep, I'm right there with you, Alex.
You gotta love the narratives. All right, moving on to pick 18 then. We've got the Lions right here. Alex going with Kalaje Cansey. Kevin going with Julius Brents, and I'm having him take Anthony Richardson right here, whose fall through the first round finally stops here with Detroit to me. Allows him to sit behind Jared Goff for a year or so and kind of develop a little bit. They've got a coach in-house that seemingly can develop quarterbacks, and Ben Johnson. And so that's kind of the way I've got, but it would not surprise me to see Detroit take this pick, move back either later into the first or early in the second, and acquire more draft picks on this one, because this is really kind of a luxury pick for them.
Yes. So with moving on from Jeff Okudah, that's part of the reason I went with Brents, is getting that secondary help since you moved away from Jeff Okudah. I would personally be shocked if Richardson fell this far. Not that it can't happen, right? It could fall exactly the way Derek has it predicted, right? But I would be personally shocked to see him fall to 18 with some of the hype that's been around the kid.
Right.
I recognize that this would be Detroit's second defensive line pick that they had made. But again,
basically 2 defensive tackles nonetheless.
Yeah.
You're on a 4-3, you got to have 2.
Bingo.
I mean, so realistically, like now you have set it and forget it defensive line, and you're basically telling the rest of the division, try to beat us with the 2 seconds that you have to throw the football.
Yeah, and 0 chance to run it.
Yeah.
So I get it. If it's there, it very well could be. This is another one I've seen Bijan Robinson highly like mocked to is Detroit. And that one there, like, I get it. They've got a great line. They've got all of that. I don't like that landing spot for him at all. Behind DeAndre, he's got DeAndre Swift and they've got David Montgomery there. Like a 3-headed monster running back leaves like 0 fantasy production for any of them.
Yeah, I definitely don't see them going Bijan. But again, I do think this one was tough because it is their second pick. You know, there's probability that they probably won't. I think high probability that they won't be picking here because they will find a trade partner to move back or move out of the first round. So this was a tough one for me. I just said, screw it. Like if you're gonna go all in, go all in. Get your D line figured out, and then tell the rest of the division, good luck.
I like it. All right, moving on to pick 19. No suspense here. We've got Brian Branch all across the board with us thinking that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to work on their secondary. Any other thoughts here?
Biggest position of need.
Yeah, right. This has been a pain point for Tampa. It could be offensive line if their guy falls, right? It's going to depend on how their big board is set up. So you could see offensive linemen here, I believe. But for the points of all of our mocks, right, these kind of the top offensive linemen that we were looking at least have all been picked. So you're flipping over and now you're taking the best remaining player at a position of need, which is safety and Brian Branch.
Bingo. Moving on to pick 20 at Seattle. And again, no suspense here. We're all thinking offensive line. Osiris Torrance going here. Although really? I could. Yeah, we pick 20. All of us had this one going here.
It's hard, right? I mean, they went defense in their first pick. Or at least, did we all have defense? Yeah.
Yeah, we all had them taking either Tyree Wilson or
so they got their edge rusher, and now you're sticking in guard, right? Building through the trenches, Pete Carroll style, right? He wants to kind of have it dirty and grimy a little bit. And you just signed Geno to a mid-size
deal,
right?
A deal.
But this helps protect your investment. And it gives another mobile blocker for Kenneth Walker and hopefully gives Geno a little bit more time and he can continue finding DK and Tyler Lockett. Two other notable
picks that I could see going here because I struggled with this one a little bit. I could see them potentially taking like a Hendon Hooker right here, get the quarterback, let him come in, let him fully heal up.
I think Geno's Hooker's older than Geno.
No, Geno's early 30s. Hendon's like mid 20s.
He's 27.
I like it, but
start calling him Grandpa.
Yeah, it could be. I could see them making a move like that. I could also see them going defensive tackle here as well. Kalijah Cansey potentially still on the board. Brian Bressie still on the board. I could see them potentially making a move on that one there and really solidify that defensive tackle spot. Even though you brought in Draymond Jones during the offseason. He's going to need a little bit of he's going to need some backup there. So you could go that really solidify that defensive line all the way through at that point. All right. Any other thoughts on 20? Moving on to 21. And Alex going with Dalton Kincaid here. Kevin and I both thinking Kalijah Cansey is the pick here at 21. The Chargers were awful run defense last year, and this is a big stop and big get for them to kind of plug up that hole there.
Yeah, I toyed around with this one a lot, and not so much tied it, but I was really debating whether they were going to go like Jordan Addison, right, and kind of have the hometown kid come over and play receiver and learn under Keenan Allen, and for whatever reason, I did pivot away from that. The Chargers have just been so damn nicked up on the defensive side of the ball, so they might as well keep throwing players at the problem and see if you can just find one that stays healthy.
I went Kincaid here because Bijan wasn't available.
All right, fair enough. Moving on to 22 then. All right, so this one here, kind of a mixed bag. Alex has got Quentin Johnson going to the Baltimore Ravens. I've got Julius Brents going here, and Kevin has Emmanuel Forbes. So Kevin and I looking on the defensive secondary here, cornerback going here. Alex looking at the wide receiver, looking if they can't try and pair him up with OBJ, Rashad Bateman, and Mark Andrews.
Yeah, so my opinion is Baltimore would really like to go offensive line here. And maybe they still do. I think that it's a position that maybe they make a stretch for kind of an interior offensive lineman to help get a little bit younger on that side of the ball. But when in doubt, right, the Ravens do like to go secondary, and Emmanuel Forbes kind of foots the bill for what they're wanting to do there on the outside.
Yep. That was kind of why I went Julius Spence, the big, long, lanky guy that can play physical.
Mm-hmm. This was a promise to Lamar.
Isn't that what OBJ was?
I think this is another promise to Lamar.
Fair enough.
A lot of promises for 45% completion percentage.
Wow.
All right, moving on to pick 23 here. We got the Vikings, and Alex saying Emmanuel Forbes. I'm saying Jordan Addison, and Kevin going with Will Levis. Finally, the Will Levis fall for Kevin comes to a complete here.
Yeah, right. So Cousins is in the last year of his deal. The fan base in Minnesota is not sold, right? Like, I think Kirk Cousins has gotten you about as far as he can get you. Now, it makes for a lot of good regular season games. They're going to make the playoffs. I think they're kind of, I don't know if they're clearly the best team in that division now, but they're definitely, I think they're sitting at the one spot with everybody else knocking on their door. And they got to figure out what they're going to do here with aging Dalvin Cook, a new contract for why am I spacing on
Justin Jefferson?
They extended Justin Jefferson. Wide receiver makes sense, though. Like, I like the Addison pick with Adam Thielen leaving town here, but I think at this point they saw a quarterback sitting there and went, you know what? This gives us 5 years. We have 1 year of development. We can check the guy out. He has a lot of the same skill sets that Kirk Cousins has, honestly. So they won't have to change a whole hell of a lot. And then, you see what it looks like with Will Levis and Alexander Mattison instead of Kirk Cousins and Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, I know that it's a new regime in Minnesota, because if it was still the old regime of Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer, thank you. You'd think I never knew who those guys were. Then it would definitely be a defensive back here, because that's what that lock it in. But
they also drafted a lot of wide receivers.
They did that. But I think that they'll go defensive back here to try and shore up that defensive backfield was atrocious.
Fair enough. All right, moving on to, actually, you want to know something? Hot take here. I've actually got Minnesota finishing third in the NFC North right now as things
wouldn't
sit.
Surprise me in the least.
So,
although they're on their So they had a bad year last year, right? They didn't make
No,
the playoffs.
No, they had a good year. They won like 11 or 10.
they lost to the Giants in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah. So yeah, bad year.
But they
bad year
won
coming.
all of those one-score games in the regular
games, right.
season, and they tend to bounce the other way the following year. So I've got them finishing third in that division.
Bad year coming.
So anyway, just hot take, throw that out there. Way too early prediction. There we go. All right, pick 24. Jacksonville on the clock. Alex taking Lucas Van Ness. I've got Dalton Kincaid. Kevin's got Kylie Ringo. All across the board. You guys both taking defensive players. I'm taking the offensive guy here, and I think this one here, like, this is just one of those that this just feels like a fit for me with the Dalton Kincaid. They've got Evan Ingram, who has a similar skill set, offensive weapon to it, but only on that franchise tag here, so they get their tight end to play the next 5 years for him.
Yeah, this as crazy as it sounds, it's almost kind of a luxury pick for the Jaguars, right? Like things have finally started to click with young players. Trevor Lawrence taking kind of his next step and looking pretty stinking good the last 8 weeks of the season, really. I think they still need some help on defense, which is why I went Keely Ringo. They went the front seven last year to help out the defense. Now they're going to worry about the back end to see if they can solidify shutting some of these teams down. And again, in a division that doesn't have a whole lot of passing prowess, right? Like, you're not worried about Tennessee. The Colts most likely are going to have either a statue veteran or a young rookie quarterback that's trying to learn. And then Texans are going to have a rookie quarterback as well. So they have the ability to have some of these defensive players learn on the fly.
I've just gone best available, and Lucas Van Ness was still there, and that's where they went.
If he falls, I think they're super happy with that.
Exactly. Yeah. Agreed. All right, moving on to 25 here. The Giants pick, and Alex and I both thinking that they're taking Zay Flowers. Kevin's got Jack Campbell. I actually really like that Jack Campbell pick when I saw that one on the board and I was going through it. But I think that they do probably spend a little bit of capital here on wide receiver. That wide receiver room last year was kind of a hodgepodge mixture of just who could stay healthy and who could they find that could lace them up every single Sunday. So I think they invest the draft capital here and bring in a very talented, explosive playmaker.
I think the more I think about it, the only real problem I have with Zay Flowers is they have 3 other guys just like him on the roster already.
That's kind of why I like that one, because it fits for him.
It's like there's no differentiating factor between him and the guys they have on the roster. I thought Jack Campbell kind of fit that tough nose, gritty defense, help stop the run up the middle, as you're going to be seeing a lot of that from the Philadelphia Eagles, assuming the Cowboys are going to have a 2-headed monster at running back, and Mike McCarthy saying that he wants to run the ball more now that Kellen Moore's out of town. So Giants drafting to their division. What do? They like to run. Here, we're going to put a guy right in the middle who is not afraid to stick his nose in there and just be a tackle machine for us.
Like it. Alex, any other thoughts on 25?
No, I think that I like them going receiver here just to try and give Daniel Jones a little bit more support, take some of the onus off of Saquon, who had a really good year last year, and just try to make them more balanced. I think that's the way they go.
I like it. All right, number 26 here, the Cowboys. Alex going Miles Murphy. I've got them taking Michael Mayer, and Kevin go with the Bijan Robinson here. So you're again kind of all across the board. I'll start off with Michael Mayer. Like, kind of fits right. They need help along the offensive line. They need some help along the tight end route there. Michael Mayer, inline blocker, can also be the pass catcher. Kind of fits that mold of a Jason Witten type to it. So yeah, that was kind of the reason going the Michael Mayer pick. Could see them going with an Osiris Torrance if he falls this far.
I think the Cowboys actually hate everything that fell to them right here. Only because there's enough different things to fill positions that they need. that no one helped clear no one helped clear up the waters for him, right? They just stay muddy. At this point, it is about star power, name, branding, recognition, hype, all the things that are just total Dallas Cowboy type moves. And Bijan is the guy who takes the cake in that aspect.
I've gotten Miles Murphy here to take some of the attention away from Micah Parsons to give him to free him up a little bit more. I think this is the responsible pick. I do not think they make the responsible pick because Miles Murphy has fallen this far. I don't think they make the responsible pick here.
I think the Cowboys take Darnell Washington in the second round.
I could see that too. Makes a lot of sense.
Like, I think they deal with the fact that they feel like they can develop his receiving skills enough, but it kills two big birds for them with one stone in having him be that extension of the offensive line more often than not, while you let Hendershot run routes. And then you can have Washington develop into a more Witten type route runner, right? It's that 8 yard in where you just sure-handed, you catch it, you sit down, and you just take your 8 yards at a clip.
Yeah, I can see that one. I like that. All right, heading on over to pick 27 here. We got the Bills, and Alex has got Jordan Addison. I've got Anton Harrison. Kevin's got Quentin Johnson here. You guys both go on wide receiver. I'm taking the offensive line here, which is a big need for the Buffalo Bills.
Yes, offensive line is a big need. I guess either way, right? You're helping out Josh Allen either way you look at it, right? Like either you're getting him another weapon so that way he doesn't have to be so laser focused in on Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis. You can like he showed flashes, but they weren't quite there. So let's bring in a sure-handed receiver was kind of my thought, to move Davis into that slot role and let him try and hit up those seams for the big plays. Then you have Diggs and either Johnson or Addison there on the outside to help spread the defense out.
Bingo. Any other thoughts, Alex?
No, I think you try to take advantage of what you have with Josh Allen and give him as many weapons as you possibly can.
All righty, pick 28. That brings us to the Bengals. Alex taking Darnell Washington here. Kevin taking Michael Mayer. I'm going to go with the Bijan Robinson pick right here. Bijan's fall for me stops here at 28. And part of the reason is the fact that there's a good chance Cincinnati needs a lot of help at running back here this coming year, right? Samaje Perine no longer on the roster. Joe Mixon facing some potential legal issues out there. And, also Joe Mixon's cap hits about $12 million coming up. So they could decide if Bijan's here to draft him and move on from Joe Mixon there. And you kind of fill that similar skill set of what Samaje was really good at. And you still get the, what Joe Mixon can provide there. So that was kind of my thought process behind here.
Yeah, I think Alex and I guess I'm not going to speak for Alex. I'll just go to Michael Mayer. He's a guy, Hayden Hurst left, right? Went to Carolina, does fill that role. He can help the offensive line while protecting Joe Burrow, but he is established enough and sure-handed as a route runner to be able to fill in and have those 1 or 2 games a year that people are going to flock to the waiver wire to pick up Michael Mayer. And then the rest of the time they're going to start him and he's going to get them like 4 points and they're going to be pissed.
Right.
So I like Darnell Washington here just as a identity, right? Like you give an extra blocker for Joe Burrow, an option to develop a passer. The tight ends right now on the Bengals roster, not all that sexy. When you look at it, you've got Tanner Hudson, Drew Sample, Devin Asiasi, Mitchell Wilcox, Nick Bowers, some guy named Irv Smith. So I think that you need to have that as an option. Irv Smith, while talented, hasn't been able to be available. A little bit health averse there. So
he's got the dropsies.
And he does have that. I think that this helps you. It's Darnell Washington is as my esteemed co-host would tell you, he's such a dynamic blocker that you can afford to let, another pass catching tight end, do his thing, but you still get the ability to play that two tight end personnel that really, can confound some defenses.
I like it. All right, moving on to pick 29 here. We got the Saints. Alex taking DJ Turner. I'm taking Brian Bessie. Kevin taking Steve Avila here. So, with this one, I took the defensive line here. The Saints just kind of got old all across the defensive backfield or the defensive side of the ball here. Brian Bessie tries to come in, be a little bit of that pass rusher up the middle and run stopper. Potentially try and fill in a little bit on the Cam Jordan side of things. So that was kind of my thoughts on that pick there.
I was kind of thinking the same thing on the offensive line side of the ball. So Steve Avila played for TCU, has really started to get some really good buzz here lately as we inch closer to draft day. And I think he sneaks into the first round because teams need offensive line help and depth. And Avila steps in as a guy who can play guard right away.
Mm-hmm.
I went corner here because again they're a little long in the tooth there at the cornerback spot. So I think you
and Lattimore can't stay on the field.
Also right. That. So I just I think you get a young guy in there that can learn from those guys because there's a ton of experience. With Marshawn Lattimore, Bradley Roby's on that team, on this roster. So you can let him learn. His stock jumped so high after the combine, DJ Turner's did. So I just think that it's another, wise decision to bring in somebody that you can hopefully, use to replace some of these aging corners.
I like it. Couple of other guys that I just wanted to highlight here on ones that I almost penciled in here. Was in the linebacker spot. Drew Sanders, I could see them potentially going with him here, or Trenton Simpson, the linebacker out of Clemson. I could see them going either of those guys there. Again, just trying to get a little bit younger, a little bit of a playmaker there on the defensive side of the ball.
A lot of holes to fill here.
Exactly. All right, moving on to pick 30. And Alex has got Nolan Smith. He highlighted earlier, but he's got him going here. I've got Steve Avila going here, and Kevin's got Brian Bessie going here as well. So Eagles, right? Like part of the reason I went Steve Avila here, they'd have a needed offensive guard here. Steve Avila is a guy that has rampantly been making a climb up draft boards there, and is a guy I think that we sneak into the first round here, and makes a lot of sense right here.
I told you I'd have Nolan Smith going to the Eagles.
You're supposed to work it from 1 to 31, not the other way, Alex.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think if he falls here, that's a no-brainer. You guys obviously think they're high on him, so
they'll be extremely excited, I think, at that point.
No, absolutely. And then the same thing, Brian Bessie, another body to rotate through that defensive line as they lost. I think Philadelphia, given the right situation, I think they would like to trade back, honestly, and get a couple more picks, because realistically, I think their ultimate goal here would be defensive back, but I don't know that there's any first-round caliber defensive backs left. So I think they'd rather try and trade back 6, 7, 8 picks, whatever that looks like, and then see what the top of the second round looks like for them.
Yeah, that was the note I had in here as well, is that I think that they'll trade out of this, and I think a team will come up to pick 30, and they'll try and get it like a Hendon Hooker so that they can get that fifth-year option.
So my original, little peek behind the scenes, I had Tennessee trading up for this pick to grab Will Levis. And then I changed things around, moved him up the board and everything else. So I absolutely think the same thing. I had Tennessee giving up whatever it was, their second and a third next year or something like that, I think is what I had them giving up to jump up here and grab Will Levis to get that fifth year.
Yeah, I could see a team Tennessee makes a lot of sense. I could also see a team like Seattle. I think that they could potentially move up. They've got a couple of seconds. Minnesota, I think, is another team that we could see try and move up here as well, to try and do that. All right, pick 30. We've got Alex taking Anton Harrison Jr. I'm taking Will McDonald. Kevin taking Keon White. And with mine, it was more of a case that they're just taking the pass rusher there. Will McDonald, certainly having some very good tape and is a kind of a turnover machine at the position.
Yeah, Keon White. I think Kansas City stayed on the defensive side of the ball here. Originally, I had them looking at Jalen Hyatt. I think the knee injury and some of the speculation around that scared them off, at least in my semi-professional review. So they just switched sides of the ball and went over to the defensive side, where they are always tinkering during the regular season before they find a way to ratchet it down for the playoffs.
Unreal how they do that, right? How their defense is just
every stinking year, man.
Horrible for the first 6, 7, 8 weeks, and then all of a sudden they're world beaters. Yeah, it's unbelievable. I've got offensive line here. Just I don't think you can have too many of them, and to have a one on a cheap and have the 5th-year option on. I think that's the safe play for them as you try to protect your $500 million investment of Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, absolutely. All righty.
Well, that has done it. That's 31 because
that's 31. Yeah, that wraps
Miami,
it up, right?
Miami gave up their they forfeited their pick for tampering for Tom Brady.
Cheaters. Thoughts? What you like? What you didn't like? What was a surprise?
I tell you, the only thing that I know for sure is going to happen on Thursday is chaos. And I can't tell you how many different mock drafts I looked at, just to get an idea of what other people are thinking. I didn't look at your guys's, but I did look at other ones to see, and it's just everybody has a different take as to what's going to happen. And so I think on Thursday, it's just going to be a guessing game for a lot of us that don't know. And that's all of us that aren't inside those draft rooms at that particular time. So the teams that have the ability to adjust and pivot and will be able to do well. But I think going into this, you need to have, not just 3 or 4 guys you want to make at that pick, but 5, 6, 7 guys that you want to make at that pick. And if you don't have 5, 6, 7 guys, you better be working the phones to try and find somebody else who wants one of those 5 or 6, 7 guys that's available there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy. Just I think we've said it more than once here, but a lot of drafts, like when you go through it, you kind of have that feel, and this guy feels like he's going to go kind of here, and you can kind of slot it out, and you feel pretty confident going into draft night, at least this close to it, that you feel pretty confident on. That's not the case this year, where like you even think last year where we had a bunch of trades, things like that, we all thought kind of going into that okay, this is just going to be kind of a ho-hum. We're just going to kind of see it go through, and it got exciting here. I'm actually very interested to see what it comes down to when we think that this one's going to have a lot of movement, a lot of excitement to begin with on this. And this is one of those, right? Like we've kind of talked about how we've gone through more than once on deals, and we could probably sit down right now and each one of us do a mock draft and come up with a different landing spot and some different scenarios that play out here. Just going through it right now off the top of the head. So it is one of those that very, very intriguing heading into this year's draft.
I mean, even think back to last year, and the reason why last year was so crazy is because of all of the deals that got made. I can tell you right now that even if the teams select in this order and there are no deals that are made, even if there's no draft night trades, which there will be, but even if there isn't, I still think that there's a lot of unknowns, and it'll be just as entertaining as last year's was with all of the deals that were getting made. So that to me is I think that's what the NFL wants, right? They want this to be an exciting event. But oh, my goodness, it's going to be.
The unknown makes people tune in, right?
Yeah.
Like it
for
creates
sure.
more viewers this way.
And it's why we tune in every Sunday, because we don't know what's going to happen. When they kick that ball off, anything can happen between 15 on the clock and 0 after 4 quarters. So this is what the NFL is getting. This is essentially another game that'll take longer than all of their games do, but it's another unknown, and there's a lot of them.
Absolutely. So I tell you what, we're going to save all of our prop picks for Thursday night. Make sure that you're tuning in. We go live about 15 minutes before the draft kicks off, which is 7:45 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure that you're tuning in right here on the YouTube channel. You can also find us over there on Twitch. We'll also be live on Twitter, all of that. Find us across all the socials, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, at Good Old Boys FF. But the best place, go to YouTube, youtube.com/@GoodOldBoysFF. Click that subscribe button, ring that bell. You'll get notified when we go live. What final thoughts do we have out there, guys?
See y'all Thursday.
Yeah. See you on Thursday for chaos. Bring your popcorn.
Get your popcorn ready. Let's make it happen.
Damn
all right.
It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
One of the funnest nights of the year. We'll be live with special guests. Make sure that you're tuning in. He's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloos.